So, today we're talking about the best perks for the Bobcat. If you've never seen this series before, it's basically just a showcase of the weapon, followed by, well, you know, the best perks for it. So, the Bobcat is one of the best weapons that has been in Fortnite for pretty much ever. It released with the military set. In fact, if you go to the collection book, even today, you can go all the way down to the expansion schematics, straight to the military weapons, and you can get it without a voucher. This is actually a pretty attainable weapon in that respect. Legendary Flux is kind of difficult to get in bulk, so you can get it 50 every week from the weekly shop, and then you can get it occasionally from the different collection book rewards. So Flux is actually pretty easy to get, if not in bulk, but you can unlock these, and you can spend a core reperk to get whichever 6 perk you're looking for, and we'll talk about which ones you'll want down the line. But to show some more gameplay, the Bobcat, it just shreds. This is a weapon that we've known is very great for a very, very long time. If you guys remember back in the day, the Bobcat was always button heads with a Silent Spectre in the community, with people trying to figure out which SMG was better, and I have actually kind of talked about that in the top 10 SMGs video, which will be shortly following this upload. So if you guys want to subscribe to the channel, I'll be coming out with that very soon. I wanted to get the best perks of the Bobcat video out first because of the fact that it was, if I'm not mistaken, the second best perks video I had ever made on my channel. And back then, I didn't show any gameplay. It was 3 years ago. That it was way before a lot of weapon changes. Some of the 6 perks we'll be talking about today didn't even exist, so things have changed quite a bit. And yeah, the Bobcat is definitely something that needs to have a little bit more attention given to it starting now. So we got the perks up on the screen. This is kind of what I was running part of my gameplay with, and let's just get started in talking about the different pros and cons with this weapon. So first and foremost, it has the very standard 10.8 fire rate, 50 rounds in the mag, which is really, really good for an SMG, but it's balanced out by 3.3 reload time. However, 3.3 reload is pretty easy to get around nowadays because we have Chaos Agent. I'm going to mention him right now and early because he is a thing that exists. Basically, he makes it so that when you phase shift, you can reload instantly. Technically, it's any ability, but when you're running SMGs, you definitely are looking at phase shift because it's an instant reload so fast that it's even a little buggy. So in a lot of my gameplay, you'll see me do that reload action, and then I'll switch my weapons back and forth just to, you know, trigger the actual reload to happen. And it is a really, really powerful ability. So obviously being able to reload instantly will change some of the perk recommendations of this video. So depending on whether or not you have Chaos Agent, it could change which perks you want to run. If you're interested in actually getting Chaos Agent, I'm going to link this yearly timeline down in the description below. You can scroll through it and just look for all the red heroes. Those are all the ones that I consider must grabs, and Chaos Agent comes out with dungeons. If you're interested in getting Chaos Agent through dungeons and you're playing at a time when dungeons are available, you can just run the lab 3 times. You just have to run the crypts once to unlock the labs, and then run the labs 3 times, and you'll get Chaos Agent. He's a really great hero, as mentioned, and yeah, this will kind of show when it's going to come around. If you're interested in anything else in the game, that'll be in the description down below. So, with the Chaos Agent talk aside, let's get into the general best perks for the Bobcat. Now, first and foremost, this depends on which 6 perk you want to use. I am going to be stating for now and for the rest of this video that Affliction is my all-around best pick. If you use crit rating, you know, stacking crit rating, stacking damage, you can use stacking crit rating to get the most damage out of this weapon, but you're constantly ramping up to get there. So you're starting from a 0 bonus, getting up to a better bonus. If you want me to go super in-depth on these 2 6 perks, I'm just going to link my Silent Spectre video down below. It's a very similar weapon to the Bobcat. I even timestamped the parts of the video when I talked about these 2 6 perks, and I go really in depth with exactly how these work. So I'm pretty sure it translates to the Bobcat well enough. If you have these 6 perks, basically, if you're running crit rating, this build is probably fine. You don't necessarily need a crit rating perk in this case necessarily, although it is still recommended because, again, you're always starting from 0, and even stacked all the way up, you're not going to have as much of a crit chance as you do now. So you still kind of want to consider using that crit rating perk, even though you don't technically need it. If you're using totally rocking out, that stacking crit rating can be great, but I would recommend, you know, maybe a triple crit damage build with that, but it wouldn't be as convenient. It wouldn't be as consistent as well. And the stacking damage is just great to throw in, but if you do have the stacking damage, you can't have the extra damage to afflicted or slowed and snared, and that's a really big debuff. You can, of course, have damage to mist monsters and bosses, but the 5th perk will be dead most of the time, so I don't really think the trade-off is worth it. So for the future of this video, for the rest of the video, I'm going to be talking about Affliction because it's basically just better than Snared. Snared will definitely snare an enemy, and it'll make them walk slower, and that can stack with floor spikes. That can be super useful. I don't think it's as relevant as just doing tons of damage with Affliction, and there's the fact that Affliction kind of gives this weapon area of effect damage. Meaning you can basically just hit an enemy once, and if you've seen in a lot of my gameplay, I typically, you know, wave between the enemies, trying to tag as many enemies as I can just so that they chip away with Affliction. Unfortunately, the mission that I picked to record in today was Healing Death Burst, so it's not showing as well, but if you're not in a Healing Death Burst mission, Affliction can do so much damage beyond that initial bullet that you can just move on to other targets and you can kill a whole crowd basically at once. And it's a very, very powerful thing to take advantage of. So Affliction is my pick for the best 6 perk, but there are arguments for the others. And of course, the Silent Spectre video down below gets into that further. So for standard perks with Affliction 6 perk, crit rating, double crit damage is the highest DPS on paper. Now, this is if you are laying into a smasher or a mini boss, constant fire rate, it is actually the best way to go, even without Chaos Agent. That 3.3 reload time is factored into my math, and it is the highest DPS. However, in the real world, you're not always going to be constantly laying into the same target. You're going to be switching targets, you're going to be shooting at one enemy, shooting at another, you know, reloading in between, maybe more casually. You're not maybe going to be taking advantage of every single bullet, and even if you tried to, you might find yourself in a situation where you're running up to a big enemy with 10 bullets in the mag, and then you're reloading anyway. So it's not really that cut and dry to just show the raw numbers. I do, even with a lower technical DPS, still recommend at least a reload perk. That said, I have also done the math on the reload versus mag size, and even though you reload 75% faster, with a mag perk, you are shooting for 75% longer. So you are actually getting an identical damage output between mag size and reload if you factor in the time spent reloading. So it's actually really interesting in that regard. I still recommend reload because 3.3 seconds is a huge amount of time. Could you imagine if you ran out of ammo as a smasher was crushing through your base? Reload is a huge perk to get right back into it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I was running this exact perk loadout with Chaos Agent. If you're running Chaos Agent, everything I just said about reload is completely irrelevant. He is extremely good for not only reloading your weapon instantly, but flying you off the map if you're not careful. So it's definitely something you gotta be careful of. You do sort of have to readjust your aim constantly, but Chaos Agent really changes the game. I do want to add something else though, because even if you want to run a reload perk on the Bobcat, if you're not running Chaos Agent, I do recommend Stars and Stripes Jonesy. That extra 24% chance to refund ammo gives you effectively a 31.7% larger mag size. If that number is confusing to you, I'll link the video down below where I explain all about that. It's actually really interesting if you're a math nerd, but you can just take my word for it if you don't want to get into it. It's essentially a 31.7% mag increase, and you save 31.7% of your ammo. It's kind of just extra ammo, more bullets for free ammo if you don't want to run Chaos Agent. But yeah, if you're running in the lead, Ranger Deadeye is great because he has the Teddy and great abilities, and he's an Outlander, so you can farm while you're gaming. It's a really great combo, and so the loadout is vaguely relevant, but depending on the heroes you're using, the perks do change a little bit. And I'm going to continue on with saying triple crit damage with totally rocking out is highly recommended. I had a ton of fun with that in a video actually recently as I'm recording this. I'm going to link that down below as well, where we basically just brought a triple crit damage Bobcat with a totally rocking out loadout into a 160 zone, and it shredded. I don't know if that's like truly consistent enough to be the best perks all around. For DPS, it was definitely ideal. It was very, very good. Highly recommended, super fun loadout, but a little impractical considering you essentially need totally rocking out because your crit chance is 10%, or you need to be constantly activating it, which is just a lot to keep on top of, and you need a Chaos Agent to reload, of course, because we won't have a reload perk. It's a lot to keep track of, but the damage is definitely there. If you're running a typical, boring, any loadout, Blast from the Past or whatever, reload, crit rating, crit damage, damage to inflicted is my personal recommendation for the best general perks. That being said, of course, all the limitations previously mentioned do apply. And then there's fire rate. So fire rate is tricky because it does allow you to shoot faster. In fact, in my original Bobcat video, I recommended fire rate and damage. At that time, I really didn't like crit rating and crit damage, and that was because I don't like the fact that so much of this weapon's damage is coming from this huge bonus you only get 62% of the time. And even today, I don't love that. The fact that most of your bullets are doing nothing, and then every once in a while you crit for a ton of damage. It's not the best thing, but I've kind of gotten over that because when you're shooting 10.8 times per second, it doesn't matter. On average, you're going to crit 3 or more times per second, and you'll never even notice the times when you don't crit. And realistically speaking, while fire rate and damage is identical DPS to a crit rating crit damage build in my old numbers at least, it is basically fake damage. And the way that I figure that is that you're not really doing more damage per bullet. You're just shooting faster and then making yourself reload more often. And as mentioned, the Bobcat has one of the highest reload times for an SMG in the entire game, and even with a reload perk, it's still pretty substantial. In fact, if I change it right now, you're seeing 1.9 is actually pretty good, but the Silent Spectre, if I'm not mistaken, has a 2.2 without any reload perk at all, or a 2.0 even, so you're basically getting the Silent Spectre's reload speed by giving it a reload perk. So it's so slow that you don't want to be reloading more often. So I highly recommend crit damage over damage or fire rate. It's just not recommended because you'll be shooting insanely fast and reloading all the time. But if you wanted to do a double fire rate loadout, I'm pretty sure that's actually the highest DPS this weapon can achieve on its own without totally rocking out. And while I just said that's not recommended, it is still technically a thing. And I say that carefully because I know one of you is going to try it. If you have some fun with that, you know, comment down below. Maybe you guys want to see a fun 160s video where I'm running 2 fire rate perks. That could be really fun because the number gets really high. Double fire rate Bobcat is nearly 20 shots per second. It's kind of insane. So there's definitely some fun to be had there, even if it's not totally recommended. So there you go. There's the Bobcat best perks. Obviously a much longer video because there's a lot more to talk about. There are new 6 perks, new mechanics, Chaos Agent, and a lot of the other heroes in the game have been tweaked a little bit to make this a lot more interesting. And the Bobcat and SMGs have been rebalanced in the past, so it's actually really definitely one of the best weapons of the game. Top 10 SMGs video link down below. It ranked very high. So yeah, if you guys want to support the channel, feel free to use code Mista to check out. I really appreciate it. It helps make these videos. These videos actually take quite a bit of work, and it helps me out a lot. Twitch link down below if you guys want to hang out with me. Comment down below what you guys want to see, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy. And then